NXT starts off with Josh Briggs versus Inamura street fight. This was a fun, enjoyable match. Enjoyable match overall. Josh Briggs actually picked up the victory, which was very, very surprising. I thought the whole purpose of this feud was for Inamura to prove him right that doing things the right way and fighting with honor is the correct way for him. But they had Josh Briggs win, which is very interesting. So I don't know where we're going from here because there's really no reason for this feud to continue, especially because it's a street fight. Typically, when you add a stipulation to a match, that's typically the end of that feud. So I don't really know what's next for these two. Now it looks like they're teasing a potential matchup between Briggs and Ricky Saints because when Ricky Saints was doing his entrance, Briggs like accidentally, well, not accidentally, purposely bumped into him, and then he said some words to him. So it looks like that's gonna be the next thing for Briggs. Don't know what you're doing, Inamura. I'm just assuming he's just gonna disappear off TV because I'm assuming that his push was very similar to Eddie Thorpe and Dante Chin, where they push him for a few weeks, even a month or two, and then they just disappear. Shawn Michaels has a weird thing where he pushes someone for like a week or even a month or two, and then they just disappear off TV for a while, and then he comes back. He has a weird thing with doing that with a couple of wrestlers where he just pushes them, stop, pushes them, stop. I'm assuming Inamura is just going to be the next one of those, but I could be wrong. But we'll see what happens with these two. Am I that interested what's next for these two? Not really. They put on good matches in ring. It's more so the character work and the mic work that really needs to really adjust and really needs to be fixed. But this was a fun, decent, enjoyable street fight. Afterwards, we end up getting Ricky Saints versus Jasper Troy. They've been pushing this story for a bit. This match was very disappointing. This match was very, very slow. It was a very tough watch, mainly due to the crowd, because the crowd sucked in Philadelphia. It was terrible. Now, apparently, the Philly crowd was loud. People who was actually in attendance saying that it was loud on TV. It didn't register that way because it was so many moments where you guys weren't making any noise. Maybe it was the arena, maybe that was the reasoning why, but on TV, the crowd sucked. Ricky Saints picked up the victory. It looks like his next opponent is probably going to be Josh Briggs. So it looks like they're pushing that story. I don't really understand that reasoning. I feel like this feud should continue, even though I'm not saying it's the most entertaining feud, but it's tied 1-1. I don't think the feud should just end like that. But if the feud is going to end, I'm not really going to complain about it because the feud wasn't the most exciting. So I don't mind them moving on. Plus, if they're going to continue the feud, I always felt like Ricky Saints was going to win the feud anyway. So this is a way where technically Ricky won, but he technically didn't because Jasper already got a win over him. So it's like he got the last match, but Jasper still got a win, and Ricky didn't beat him more. So you can go either way with it. So if it is in the feud, I'm not really completely mad at it, but I do think it should continue just because I would like a definitive winner. But it is what it is if it's not. But this match was very disappointing. It was a very tough watch, but mainly due to the crowd. But I'm still interested to see what they do with Ricky Saints. I do think his booking is a bit weird and a bit just very bad since he's been in NXT. But to be fair, there's really nowhere to put him because you can't put him in the NXT title picture unless you want him to really dethrone over. But they have clearly someone else they're prepping for that spot. So then you could put him in a North American title picture. But the problem with that is there's not enough heels for him to go after because there's no heels for Ricky Saints to really face outside of Ethan Page. So it's like there's really not a clear direction to put him in unless you want him to just put over other talent in NXT. We'll see where this ends up going. Interested to see what they do with Ricky Saints and Joshua Troy. Hopefully they continue. Hopefully they do a better job of building these two, but we'll see how it plays out. We end up getting Jordan Grace. We end up getting her face-to-face promo with Blake Monroe. This segment was very tough to watch, especially the beginning, because it started off with Jordan Grace cutting a promo, and I swear she cuts a promo like a 2K My Rise character. I swear that's how she cuts a promo. Because man, the beginning of her promo was just terrible. She was talking slow, felt like she didn't even know what to say. She was basically talking about the struggles of NXT. Then you end up getting Blake Monroe. She interrupts. She ends up having security. Ends up saying that she has a contract where if Jordan Grace ends up laying a finger on her, that's what she said, lays a finger on her, then the match at Heatwave is canceled. Then she tries to antagonize her, tries to get her angry, but it doesn't work, and she ends up taking out the security. And then she ends up holding Blake's hand. She ends up like grabbing her hand, just holding it, and then she ends up using her microphone to talk, and then she ends up saying that she'll see her at Heatwave. Now, I know what Blake Monroe means by lays a finger, but technically speaking, she did grab you and hold you, and was damn So shouldn't that count as, a way to cancel the match? Now, I'm assuming she really meant, actually attacking her, but still. Also too, how did she just get this contract? Like, she didn't say a restraining order or anything. She just said a contract. So when she said a contract, I assumed that it had to be signed, but I also assumed that it had to be signed by Jordan Grace as well. It was a bit confusing. I feel like she could have just said restraining order or some sort like that instead of just saying a contract. This feud, it's interesting. Well, not really. It's somewhat interesting. I do feel like that I'm glad we're finally getting a match. It is slowly built. I feel like wish it was more heat to this rivalry. To be honest, the purpose of this rivalry is just based off insecurity of Jordan Grace. Um, See how the match plays out. It is a heat wave. I don't know who wins this match because you could go either way. I think they're gonna have Jordan Grace win because the story they've been telling was basically Blake Monroe calling her, ugly, not attractive. I feel like with that type of storyline, it only makes sense for the babyface to win. Now, I will prefer Blake wins because I've been saying this for the longest. Why is Jordan Grace in NXT? Now you could say the same thing with Blake Monroe, but I feel like a character like Blake is more necessary. There's really no reason for Jordan Grace to be here because there's not really a reason for her to be here because the type of gimmick she plays, it's not needed in NXT. Plus, we already have a bunch of women who already do similar things who could easily do her gimmick. We literally have Tyra May Steele, the LFG winner, who could literally replace Jordan Grace with that same gimmick she's already playing. But we already have that in the make. So it's like her gimmick is not really needed. We'll see how this feud plays out, but I'm going to be honest here. If they only do a one and done match, I actually will be happy because this feud, it hasn't been terrible. It just hasn't been good enough where it warrants it to continue. But I wouldn't be shocked that it continue this feud. But we'll see how the match plays out. Hopefully the match is good, but it should be interesting to see who wins that matchup at Heatwave. Now, this is where NXT actually started to get interesting. We end up getting Fatal Influence versus the Elegance group, if I'm not mistaken, from TNA. I forgot their name. But this was a really good match. Really fun, good match. You end up getting Masha Slamovich. She was the special guest referee. So, of course, it was some shenanigans. It was a moment where she was distracted. Oh my, I always forget her name. I'm just gonna call her Dana Brooke because I always forget her name. She ends up getting a pinfall on Jacy Jane, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it was Jasmine Nix. But Masha was distracted. This allowed her to not end up picking up the victory. This allowed Jacy Jane to take advantage, and she ends up picking up the pinfall instead. I like what they do here. I like what they did here. Simple, nothing too major. I like that it didn't lead into some huge shenanigans or brawl. You didn't need to do all that for this feud, for this match that's going to happen at Heatwave for the TNA Championship. I like what they're doing here. I've been loving Jacy Jay's reign as champion, as NXT champion and TNA champion. They've been doing amazing work. Hopefully, they continue to book her well until a Pacific someone wins that NXT championship, who I'm hoping is Jada Parker at whenever she wins that #1 contendership match at Heatwave. But we'll see how that plays out. But this was really good. I really enjoyed this. Now we end up getting Ethan Page and Chelsea Green. They end up having their Canada and USA peace treaty, which I thought was very entertaining as well. There were some moments in this where it was a tough watch. I will say that. It was entertaining overall. But it started off with Ethan Page hyping up Tavion. Then he ends up addressing his issues with Tavion. Tavion comes back, ends up mentioning, him, his struggles and him overcoming the odds and him being the underdog and that Ethan Page shouldn't underestimate him. Then you get Chelsea Green. She ends up talking some trash to Tyra May Steele. Then Tyra ends up mentioning how she's an Olympic gold medalist and how that she could easily take down Chelsea Green. Chelsea ends up mentioning how she's the longest women's United States championship. They go back and forth. They both can't agree. This is not a peace treaty. This is basically complete chaos. Then you get Ava. She ends up making the match official at Heatwave. Then Ethan and Chelsea tries to attack the baby faces in this situation, but they can't. The baby faces ends up putting them both in the ankle lock with them both tapping out. And that's the end of the segment. I enjoyed this segment. This was a fun, enjoyable segment. Really, Ethan Page and Chelsea Green carried this, which as they should, though, because they are the more experienced, where it did get a bit shaky when Tavion was speaking. Tavion isn't bad on the microphone, but he still needs some work there. It did get a bit shaky when he was talking, but this was overall really enjoyable segment. I'm actually excited for the match at Heatwave, and I like that they're pushing Tyra May Steele. I like that they're pushing her a bit, giving her a slow push, especially against someone like Chelsea Green. That is very shocking that she's going to have her first actual NXT, well, this isn't her first NXT match, her first NXT pay-per-view match against Chelsea Green. That's very shocking that they're actually putting her in that position. So I like what they're doing here. This should be very interesting. Now we get the main event. Trick Williams versus Jevon. This is another match that was a tough watch. Like, this match wasn't bad, but this is arguably one of the worst matches Trick Williams and Jevon had in their career, which is very weird because they had better matches with worse opponents, which doesn't make sense. But this match was a tough watch. There was a cool spot where Trick Williams is up tossing Jevon Evans off the ring apron onto the announce table, which was very shit because he almost missed it entirely, which was also very shocking. But towards the end of the match, you end up getting Trick Williams preparing for the trick shot, and he's trying to taunt Oba. Oba was watching, but then you end up seeing Mike Santana in the spot that Oba Femi was originally in, and he ends up getting distracted due to Mike Santana being there. This allowed Jevon Evans to take advantage. He ends up hitting his finisher and picks up the victory. So now he is the one to face Oba Femi at Heatwave. That causes a lot of questions. Will he actually dethrone Obafemi? Me personally, I don't think it's time. I think we should stretch this story out. Let him continue to chase after it. Because I've been saying this for longest. NXT does not have the story. That's what they've been missing for the longest time. Ever since Melo left the NXT roster, since him stop feuding with Trick, they have not, and Lyra Valkyria and stuff, they not have their story. Their story that's going to keep you invested and want you to watch every week. And I think this Jevon Evans basically finishing his story basically can be that story that they can build and build that can make you tune in every single week to get fans invested. Overall, this show was very mid. I'm gonna be honest. Until the Fatal Influence stuff and Ethan and Chelsea, the show was very mid overall. But you guys let me know your overall thoughts down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. But yeah, that's it.